China's economy is actually very fragile right now. And so even though they wouldn't publicly state it, they're in the mood to make a deal. Now, the economy is fragile, not because of Trump's tariffs, that we're shooting ourselves as much in the foot as we're shooting them. Their economy is fragile because they've never engaged in the second stage of reforms. They liberalized their economy, open to the world markets, but they still have a tremendous amount of cronyism. As I think Michelle said, it's still a command and control economy.
And to that point, Dan, about the command and control issue, one of the topics that's come up and been reported about is the extent to which the Chinese lean on their state-owned companies to try to drive this growth, which, it kind of is reaching the end of its rope. But people say, look, it's unlikely the Chinese are ever going to suggest they would stop doing that, right? I mean, why should they?
Well, this brings up the key issue in trade. If the Chinese government is going to have subsidized companies engaging in trade, that's not a genuine market environment. Now, some people say, well, who cares if the Chinese government wants to subsidize American consumers? We should simply thank them for it. But on the other hand, American workers genuinely and American businesses genuinely get hurt by that kind of cronyism and mercantilism. Now, I would say one thing about what Trump is doing. He's taking the wrong approach. I wish way back at the start he had worked with the Japanese and the Europeans and used the WTO. I think it would have been a much more effective venue. We wouldn't be going through all this drama right now.
Yeah, we're lucky we're still in the WTO at this rate, Michelle.
Right. No, Dan brings up some very good points. The degree to which the Chinese government intervenes and increasingly intervenes in the distribution of resources within the country. Nick Lardy, who you had on a couple of days ago, he's got a new book out called The State Strikes Back, and he's got this incredible data. Take a look at this. This is the yellow that you see there over the last 10 years. That's the loans going to non-financial companies in the private sector.
So it's fallen precipitously.
Fallen precipitously. The red are the loans going to the state-subsidized sector.
Which are
Look
way
at that.
up.
It's way, way up. This is a government that has turned its back on liberalization over the last 10 years. They have to decide what they want to be. Do they want to be a market economy or don't they? When they make that decision, then we can decide how we're going to interact with them.
Dan, how much longer can it continue if they have become such a command and control economy?
Well, let me give you a factoid. And if you look at the Economic Freedom of the World Index from the Fraser Institute, I think China is ranked number 106 or number 107. So they are way more statist than France, way more statist than Greece. They're not as bad as Venezuela or North Korea, but the fact that they did not continue on the liberalization that they did in the 1990s and the fact that they're now retreating. And by the way, the private companies in China aren't necessarily really private. You have a lot of backdoor cronyism because if a company's owned by one of the princelings, they get favoritism as well.
So here's the issue, though. If you go back 10 or years or so, the idea was American companies are now looking to this vast new market where perhaps their sheer entry into it can encourage China to continue opening up to the West. Now we know that Xi Jinping, that's not happening, but the Chinese market to some extent is still there. So what are businesses supposed to do, American companies, and what should our president be doing?
One thing I would say to preface my comments is that I don't think American companies quite realized the extent to which they were doing a deal where they were going to let China take their intellectual property when they first entered the market. I think a lot of them were surprised by the degree to which they sort of lost out on that deal. But we're still in the same situation we were in 10, 15, 20 years ago. American companies want to be there. It's in the interest not only of companies, but also America, that China liberalizes and opens up and integrates more in the world economy. And we haven't even touched on the fact that the TPP was designed to pressure China to make these reforms. And we sort of threw away that opportunity, which is in some sense bad, but maybe in a few senses good. But it's a big, giant mess. And Trump doesn't understand trade. So that complicates the whole situation.